Well, thank you, Anita. Now, we know you're tired. Some of you may be bored. Many of you may need a drink, yeah? So the challenge is how to keep you awake and interested. So the first thing we decided, no PowerPoints. There's no PowerPoints in this slide, in this panel at all, yeah? Second thing we decided, we're going to have arguments between the panelists, yes? So that should be interesting. And the third thing we decided is that at the end, there's going to be time for questions and answers, yes? So the way we thought we would structure the panel would be that there would be 4 rounds of discussion, partly between the panel and then afterwards with the audiences. And each round would be introduced by one person, and then the other panelists would come in. So the first round will be, why were governments so interested in BEPS? And I'll kick that off. The second round is, what type of behavioral effects do we expect from BEPS? And there we'll have Case to look at giving us the perspective of the private sector, and Graham to give us the perspective of the government sector. I mean, Graham, you've worked for, where is he?
I'm here, Jeffrey.
Yeah, you're there, yeah. Graham has done a lot of work with governments around the world, you know, for the IMF, so he'll be able to give us that perspective. And then the third round, what's the impact on less developing countries, and particularly India? And Anita's going to sort of kick that off for us. And then the last round is, well, what comes next? Is it chaos or is it celebration? And Sol will kick that for us, or kick that off. Yeah? So that's the structure that we'll have, and we hope we can keep you engaged in the discussion. Yeah. So the first round then is what drives BEPS. I mean, I think one of the things that came out clearly from the discussions today, all of us feel, well, all of you feel, I don't, that it's all driven by money. Yeah. Your governments need money. It's a cash grab. Yeah. BEPS is there, and this is why governments have plugged into this estimate coming out of the OECD that there may be $100 to $240 billion that's being lost by governments because of base erosion, profit shifting. The OECD is honest enough to say this is an estimate. Yeah, it may be less, it may be more, it may be somewhere in between. Yeah. One thing though that is pretty clear, it's probably quite significant. Yeah. But another qualification on that figure, because somebody said this morning, well, I think it was Boris that, 240 million, that's a lot of money in terms of if you divide it up among taxpayers. Billion, yeah. This is why I have my panelists here to correct me, yeah. It does seem a lot of money, but keep in mind that even a fully successful BEPS doesn't mean it's going to pull in all that money. Not going to happen. Because some of this is, the loss of revenue is due to a conscious decision on the part of government to give up certain revenue, for example, by using tax incentives or by permitting companies to exploit certain loopholes. Yes? So money, yes, it was important, but it's not the only thing. Yeah? The second thing I think that was driving the governments was the need for a level playing field. And particularly for finance ministers, they were saying, what is currently happening is that large multinationals often have a competitive advantage over domestic companies, even big domestic companies. Yes? So if we get this BEPS issue solved, then that will level the playing field between those two types of companies. The second thing that ministers were saying were that some of the less scrupulous multinationals, the minority, they were gaining a competitive advantage by the ability to push their effective tax rates down to very low levels. And if you can move from an effective tax rate of 24% to 12%, that is giving you a big competitive advantage. So that was the second thing then that was pushing the governments, the need to level the playing field. And then the third thing, the need to update the rules of the game. Pascal was very convincing when he went around the world and said, well, how can we have rules that we designed in 1920? How can these rules be relevant in today's environment? Of course, the answer is those rules have been continually adapted over the last 50 years. And then the fourth thing I think that was a driver of the BEPS was the fair tax debate. People think the fair tax debate started after BEPS. That's not true. It started 2 years before BEPS, in fact. And it was largely driven by the crisis. If you have to tell your citizens, look, because of the crisis, we're going to have to cut your benefits, we're going to have to cut your pensions, your health services. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to make you pay more VAT and personal income taxes. It's very hard then to explain why multinationals are not paying their fair share of taxes. So I think a lot of politicians, particularly the prime ministers and the presidents, they saw this as being a way of showing their citizens that in fact they were aware of the need to have a fair distribution of the tax burden. So there's your 4 drivers then. Money, need to level the playing field, the need to respond to the fair tax debate, and the need to update the rules of the game. So who would like to come in and contradict me or add to what I've said? Richard, you look sort of in a contradictory mood, yeah?
Always when it comes to you, Jeffrey.
Richard and I worked together for a long time, yeah?
I've been teaching for 40 years and we worked together more than 20 years ago, so it's a long while. I think it was really the last that drove a lot of them. I mean, Australia and Canada, for example, where BEPS has been very big, thought they didn't have a monetary problem. When all this arose, we thought we could ride on India and China's back. They would keep buying everything we wanted, everything we produce at inflated problems, and we wouldn't have deficits. It's turned out not to be the case, but our government bought into BEPS long before the deficit, the money had become the problem. And I think it was because that the populace sort of was getting very restive again, and this will come back later. I think of these things as cyclical. This is BEPS 2, I think Jeffrey said this morning. We'll have BEPS 3, we'll have BEPS 4. So, but I think, and I think this comes and goes in tides. So people are happy, then they get, oh, there are all these people out there cheating, the government feels they have to react politically, and then once they do react politically, the government loses interest. And I think that's going to be the real test. The governments, are they going to keep their interest up or not? So I would go for the fair tax debate myself.